I've got some great news. I want to share the latest updates, tests that I've been doing on the Lumix G9 Mark II as it relates to some of the thermal issues that I've been having. It's now been a full week since I encountered this for the first time, and I just want to bring you up to speed on all the latest because I think it's actually quite impressive, quite promising. I figured a lot out, and I have some major updates to share. So I wanted to see, does this camera get hot when it's rigged out for video in normal indoor conditions? And I can say that it does not. So you can see here, I set up the Lumix G9 Mark II. I actually have it right here as well in the same configuration. I've got extra battery power on the bottom with the Anton Titan base running into the USB-C PD port. I've got HDMI, so that's a little bit more taxing as well. And I've got it set up to shoot video. I know this is a photography camera. That's what we've been talking about this whole time, but it does have the exact same video specs as the GH6. So I want to see what are the limits of those, how far can we push them. And so I set this up in 5.8K open gate to shoot indoors. I left it on the counter and I just let it roll. I wasn't recording anything in particular, but I just set it there and let it record, and I couldn't get it to overheat. For over an hour, it was able to record in 5.8K open gate. You can see the temperature there was about 76 degrees Fahrenheit indoors, and it did not overheat. So this is very promising for the Lumix G9 Mark II in that it doesn't heat itself, at least in this mode. Now there may be other modes. I know the 4K 120 is quite taxing. Maybe there's even some issues with 60 frames a second. If you're in Cinema 4K, there can be some issues that Panasonic has outlined in the menu that you can check out. I believe it's page 779 or something like that. But from my testing, the modes that I use the most, one of them being the 5.8K open gate mode, 23976 or 24 frames a second, 200 megabits. That one indoors, totally fine. And I really like this because the camera is not heating itself. Some of these cameras nowadays generate their own heat, but it seems to me right now, based on my testing, that the Lumix G9 Mark II is susceptible to external heat pressure, but at least in this mode, it's not causing itself any problems for this, hour-long test. Could I have let it go 2 hours? Could I let it go 3 hours? Maybe one day I will, but at least for now, that was the most I pushed it inside. So this gave me the idea. I've got a shoot, and it's outdoors in the sun, partially in the shade. It's from 6 a.m. to about 10 a.m. roughly. During that time span, it's going to be 62 degrees Fahrenheit to roughly 84 degrees Fahrenheit. These are the exact same conditions as a week ago. In fact, same location, same shoot type, outdoor, garden. Can we do it again with some of the lessons that we've learned this past week with the Lumix G9 Mark II? Can we apply any of the lessons we've learned? So I decide I'm going to do the exact same settings that I did a week ago that caused me the overheating problems. So I'm going to shoot 5.8K open gate. That's all the specs are right there for you to see. I typed them all out for you. We're going to be outdoors all morning. Those are the specs I'm going to start with, and I'm going to see how far I can push it. So you can see I've got the configuration exactly the same. The battery, the HDMI, the monitor, all the same conditions in terms of location, temperature, sun, me, the camera. It's all the exact same as it was a week ago, the first time the camera overheated on me. And I was shooting that way again today, thinking, wow, this is working. It's working quite well. Did I make a mistake? What happened? It was good. It was rolling for a long time. No issues. And I start thinking, okay, what's going on here? Well, it did eventually start triggering the alert. After a while, I could feel the camera warming up. And it was right around that time where I was getting a little bit paranoid, feeling the heat, the intensity in my hand, and I see the thermal pop up on screen. But we've learned that that Ulanzi fan works quite well. In fact, I also have that here. Clip it on the back. It's not a permanent attachment. It's just a pressure mount. You just slot it in there, turn the fan on. Let's cool the camera down. Can I keep rolling? What else did we learn this week? That the 5.8K open gate, that's a little bit more taxing, a little bit more pressure than the 4K 16:9 mode. Dropped it down to that as well. So your typical 422 10-bit, it's 150 megabits per second. There are more powerful modes on the G9 Mark II, just like there are on the GH6 and many of these Lumix cameras. This is one of the standard modes I run very, very frequently for general purpose filming. Of course, we're not talking about 60 frames a second. We're not talking about 120. We're not talking about ProRes or RAW or anything like that. I'm just talking about the modes that I use most frequently. There are 4 in this camera that I use all the time. In fact, I have them saved to my favorites recording menu. My record quality, my list is what it's called. I have 4 modes that are saved. The 4K 24, the 4K 60, the 5.8K 24, and the 4.4K 60 that is also open gate if you want to do anamorphic or you want to do open gate multi-aspect production. So I go to my good old reliable. I've got the fan turned on. Remember the Ulanzi fan? We pop that on there, going to cool it down, and we're going to switch to the 4K 16:9, kind of that general purpose mode. And I was able to actually keep the camera running. It did not completely overheat. In fact, it actually cooled down. I was quite mindful of sun exposure today. I was trying to keep it shaded as best I could, but in these circumstances, there's just times where you can't. You have to be in the sun. You're in a garden. We talked about this. If you're filming a pool or a barbecue or solar panels, there are things that need to be filmed outside, and the optimal scenario is someplace where it's sunny. A garden is another perfect example of that. So for everyone who says, well, why do you need to do this? I'm trying to paint the picture for you of there are shoots that require these conditions, but thankfully, to my amazement, the Lumix G9 Mark II is able to do it almost perfectly, almost as good as the GH6. I thought the difference was greater. I thought the fan, and it does, don't get me wrong, the fan, if you need a proper video camera for general purpose production and basically any relatively normal region or weather condition or climate, GH6 is the way to go. However, the G9 Mark II is very close. And the reason I was so frustrated to begin with a week ago figuring this out is because no one had told me there was this upper limit. I didn't know the boundary. And so it felt like total whiplash using this camera. And then all of a sudden, oh, it's overheating. It's got to power off. You can't use it for video right now. So now that I've met that limit, I've pushed it to it again and pulled back with, again, some of the devices we've got. There are other things you can use. We've talked about this. You can get an umbrella shade. I don't think it's quite as elegant of a solution. It's a little big, it's a little bulky, it's a little clunky, depending on the angle of the sun. You got to be, but if you want to shoot with an umbrella, if you have a kind of a fixed permanent setup, that could be a good option. Other people have talked about maybe whiting out the camera to some degree. And I actually really like this idea. I think we should have more white cameras. Black is cool. I like the all black, but all white is cool too. In fact, it's cool, actually cooling, instead of black, which just absorbs all that UV, all the extra heat and radiation and whatever it is to warm itself up. Let's have some white cameras so you can actually do that. There's a trick, apparently. Someone in Texas shared this trick. You can use white gaff tape, to white out certain parts of the camera to keep those spots from getting too hot. Probably works on the Sony cameras, probably works on the Lumix cameras, probably works on any of them. You can also get custom skins for cameras, which I have ordered now for the G9 Mark II, because the difference is very, very minimal, very close. So I have here, I took a picture of my car time at 10:36. So I was able to record the whole shoot. I got everything. The only thing I had to sacrifice was open gate for the last little bit. And ultimately, it ended up working out because we pushed it to the limit and we figured out what's the make or break situation and how do we solve those problems. And what I'm so glad about the G9 Mark II is that it's so close to being like a GH6. Now that I've figured all this out, I can kind of actually know, and all it takes is a little fan. Instead of some of the other cameras that give you a hard-coded 30-minute limit, oh, we're powering you off. We don't care what the temperature is, we're shutting you down. Thermal overload, or some of the Sony cameras that just, no matter how much you baby them, no matter how much love and attention you give them, they're still constantly overheating. And these small improvements that we can add are fighting a big, big problem. On the Lumix G9 Mark II, it's actually not as big of a problem as I thought it was, all things considered. Now, there may be other modes that you might need to use, and again, maybe not the right choice. But I'd say this is like 95% there. And these small touches, these small additions, these small tweaks of changing a mode fix that last 5%. The GH6, 100% rock solid. The G9 Mark II is actually quite impressive, considering that it does not have a fan. It has no thermal management vent or port like on the S5 Mark II, on the GH6. Both of those are built with fans and thermal management in mind. I'm really impressed now, actually. For as frustrated as I was, for as twisted as I felt, now I'm sitting here saying, oh my goodness, this is incredible that it can actually do this as well as it does. Indoors, you're fine. In the shade, you're probably fine. It's only in these scenarios, trying to do open gate in the sun for an extended period of time, which all things considered is unique. It's something I do all the time, but as general purpose, I can accept that it's more unique, more uncommon. But a few small additions, a few little tricks in our back pocket, and we can solve what is, to me, what could have been a crippling flaw. Because phase detect worked great. Dynamic range boost all the time worked great. The stabilization, I wasn't e-stabilizing today, but after seeing how that looked in the vlog that I did, the e-stabilization mode is incredible. Now, the crop is quite severe. So on the S5 Mark II, you've got e-stabilization. It's really good, but it's a big, big crop. And that might be okay. There's some reasons why you might want to crop in on footage from time to time. So if you want the e-stabilization, just know that it does come with a big crop, but it is really, really good. And now I'm less concerned about the heat issues. It's something I will be mindful of. I'm going to keep my eye on it. I'm going to be a little less cavalier with how I use the camera, especially if I'm filming outdoors. And all it takes is just, something I can just have easy, small, compact, rechargeable, simple solution that solves that missing 5%. Again, I'm not trying to make up a 50% oversight in some of these, full frame cameras that have no heat management. And it's, if you want anything good, go buy the Cinema line, and that comes with all these strings attached. I'm really happy. I'm really content. Feeling good about the G9 Mark II. So thank you for coming with me on this journey. It's been an adventure. It's been a saga. Every day I'm learning something new, and I will continue that progress. And I'll continue to use the camera for work, for fun, continue to push the boundaries of phase detect autofocus. Doesn't quite like sunglasses, but regular glasses is fine. So who I was filming today, she has glasses. Phase detect works fine, but sunglasses, for whatever reason, trip it up. I can accept that. I can understand. But if there's a face, if there's a human, phase hybrid autofocus works great. Much, much better than the contrast depth from defocus systems that we've had in the past. And even using the GH6 recently again, I noticed just even the speed. So I'm not running autofocus all the time. And maybe this is a misconception of, you want phase detect so you can do autofocus all the time. No, I'm using autofocus probably 50% of the time. If there's a face, if there's a human and I need to track, that's when I'll turn phase detect. I'll turn autofocus on. If I'm doing close-up detail work, I'll turn autofocus off, but I will still autofocus. So you can hit the back button here, the AF on right here. If you press that, it engages the autofocus. It'll set it. You let the button go, and it locks the focus there. And that is so much faster on the G9 Mark II compared to the GH6. The GH6 is slow. It's got that contrast depth from defocus. We don't want that anymore. We want the phase detect. We want fans too. I do want a fan, internal fan, but I'll accept the external fan for now. And just know, the G9 Mark II, far more reliable than I thought. I think it does live up to the expectations outlined by all the reviews. I just think it's missing that context of these are the furthest limits. And when you know that, you can actually appreciate it and you're going to be grateful for it. instead of hitting a limit that you didn't know was there and being upset about it, like I kind of was. And I maybe have sore feelings about it a little bit, but that's just me. I'm not upset about the camera and its existing and the design, because there's plenty of people who will tell you they're glad that there's no fan. They just take pictures. They come from the G9. They love the G9 Mark II. That's good for them. For me, we've talked about it, but I'm really happy now, actually, after today, because that's about the limits that I would push this camera to. I don't find a need to do anything beyond that, quite frankly. I just don't think the increases in bit rate are really worth it. Oftentimes the higher frame rates are more of a gimmick than they add value. I do like to shoot 60 for slow motion, but anything beyond that, the subject has to be moving really fast for it to be meaningful. 4K 120, gosh, I've had cameras that could shoot 4K 120 for a few years now, and I've only actually done it a handful of times because I just don't find it all that necessary. 60 frames a second for slow motion, general purpose, is more than enough. I think that's sufficient. Now, you might do something different, which is fast moving stuff, but if I'm in a garden or, in a backyard for a certain project, there's nothing moving that fast. Maybe an insect, maybe a bee, maybe a hummingbird. But those moments, those opportunities to capture that, again, you only need a burst. You need a quick thing. You don't need 4K 120 for 20 or 30 minutes. Maybe you do, but I think that you probably don't. So all the high impact modes, all the top tier stuff, I may end up testing it, but I probably won't, because I don't find those modes practical or useful. And so I don't think it's worth me taking the time to test something that I'm never going to actually use. Maybe if someone really, really wants me to, I can. But at that point, you're probably better off, honestly, just renting the camera, testing it yourself, whatever your conditions are, and pushing it to that limit yourself. Because no matter what I do, it's never going to be a perfect representation of what you can do. But I can show you a representation of what I do. And I can tell you that a week ago, the camera overheated unexpectedly on me because I wasn't prepared for that. I didn't think it was possible. And now we've gone through a week. We've done a cleanse. We've done a reset. And now we can praise the sun because we know how to handle it. And we got some solutions in place. So I'm going to wait for those skins to show up. I'm going to hopefully white out my camera a little bit because I think that'll actually help. Quite frankly, I think that's a big factor. We make everything black. It doesn't have to be black. I got the green on today. We're in the garden. Okay, we're growing. We're learning. Making things better, solving problems, and understanding what these things are capable of so we can use them to their fullest and actually be more creative because we're less worried about unexpected problems. We know what's going to happen. We can move with confidence, make choices with confidence, and that's all I've ever wanted. Just to know the limitations beforehand so I can prepare adequately for them.